I began to feel weightless, as my consciousness began ascending towards the ceiling. I looked down on my suffering body with pity. Then, the room filled with a flash of bright golden light. I traveled through a tunnel that revealed the cosmic secrets of my place on Earth. I had an intense feeling of understanding, yet this knowledge was such that it could not be described in human terms. Welcome to Let's Lift the Veil. If these testimonies touch you, help us spread the word. Like, comment, share and subscribe. Every interaction helps these extraordinary voices be heard by as many people as possible. Keep sharing the light. Stay curious. Stay open. Let's lift the veil together. 6 months before my near-death experience, I had an incredibly peculiar dream with elements of deeply religious symbology. The contents of the dream struck me as odd, especially considering at the time I was a devout atheist and grew up with no religious affiliation or inundation, as my family was generally agnostic. When I experienced my NDE, I suddenly realized the nature of this dream as a sort of premonition. The dream began with me, sitting atop the branch of an old oak tree, overlooking the waves crashing along a quiet beach. Behind me lay a thick forest. The scene was pristine. There was an indescribable archaic feeling of the sight, almost as if the scenery had been untouched by human hands, as it existed before all of civilization. I looked down at my body, shocked that I existed as a third-person observer. Typically, I experience dreams in the first person. To my surprise, I wasn't a human being at all, but a small red bird, similar to that of a cardinal. I sat next to my then-boyfriend, who was also in bird form. As we were observing the tides coming in, he pointed out the encroaching waves and saying that it must be high tide. There was a particular wave climbing higher and higher. I recognized a switch in me that turned on. It felt almost robotic and I sprang into action. In that moment, my consciousness almost separated from my physical body. As I watched myself from the third person, I recognized myself down below. I was no longer connected to the thoughts of my physical self, but instead began to become perplexed by my own actions. I saw myself begin to take branches from the tree in which I was sitting and fashioning what appeared to be a life raft out of the twine and branches. I understood then that this was no ordinary tide, but a tsunami was approaching. As I began this instinctual attempt for survival, my boyfriend was pleading to know what I was doing and why I was doing it. He exclaimed that we needed to run, but something in me was tuned him out. At the very last moment, as the tsunami crashed onto the shore, I pulled myself and my boyfriend atop the raft. The wave engulfed everything in its path, and suddenly we were surrounded by a 360-degree view of nothing but the vastness of the ocean. I began rowing the raft, with a fierce sense of urgency that perplexed myself, as well as my boyfriend. He continued pleading for an explanation that I continued to tune out. All around was the blueness of the deep sea and clear sky. Suddenly, through my fervent rowing, the raft collides with a wall. I begin to realize that the scene before me was painted on this wall. It was almost identical to the end scene of The Truman Show. I look up at this wall to see a ladder-like system, beckoning me to climb up to see what was beyond. For some reason, I was unable to use my legs to climb this ladder containing 13 metal rungs. As I began my ascent, my boyfriend stayed behind. The ascent was incredibly difficult, because I could only use my arms to move up the ladder. But with each step I climbed, my weight began to become lighter and lighter as my body began to transform into a human figure. By the last few rungs, I felt nearly weightless, practically floating over the top of the cliff. When I arrived at the top, a bright white light permeated everything as far as the eye could see, further distorting the landscape by a thick fog. The light was blinding but not painful. It obstructed my view of anything beyond 10 or 15 meters. The only visible object was an elliptical trellis, garnished with beautiful white roses. My consciousness returned to my physical body, and my viewpoint returned to first person. I was dreaming naturally, and felt called to walk beneath the trellis, to discover what was beyond the fog. I began to approach the structure, and after taking a few steps, a figure appeared from beyond the fog and approached me from my right. The older man was about 5 feet 11 inches. He wore a long red robe and was carrying a wooden staff in his right hand. His beard was long and white. He walked gracefully towards me, stopping me from approaching the trellis by placing his staff on my chest. I looked at him curiously, asking why he stopped me. He replied with 4 simple words that have stuck with me. "You're not ready yet." Confused, I asked him what he meant. Again he said, "You're just not ready yet." Then he turned away and disappeared the way he came. At this point, my boyfriend thrust himself up and over the cliff. He seemingly did not experience the weightlessness that I had during my ascent. He caught the last glimpse of the man before he disappeared through the fog. He asked me who the gentleman was. I replied that I didn't know. He gestured to the trellis, questioning why I hadn't pursued the path beyond. I told him that I couldn't cross the threshold. He asked me why not. I told him that the man told me I wasn't ready yet. Then I awoke from my dream. As I awoke, I was incredibly perplexed, especially considering my lack of religiosity in the context of the contents of this dream. There was no doubt that the gentleman that appeared before me was a godlike figure, regardless if I was a believer or not. This observation was unequivocal. In addition, there seemed to be aspects of my dream that felt deeply symbolic, despite my unfamiliarity with religious texts. This dream differed in intensity from others, and felt viscerally real in many respects. However, I had no inclination as to the relevance of this information, or what could have been meant by the figure's contention that I wasn't ready yet. And so, I put this dream away, unable to discern its significance. 6 months later, everything made sense. The dream was a premonition of my near-death experience. The NDE was brought about by a heart attack. I felt intense chest pains and then numbness in my extremities. This lack of feeling began to spread to the center of my body. I began to feel weightless, as my consciousness began ascending towards the ceiling. I looked down on my suffering body with pity. Then, the room filled with a flash of bright golden light. I traveled through a tunnel that revealed the cosmic secrets of my place on Earth. I had an intense feeling of understanding, yet this knowledge was such that it could not be described in human terms. There was a sense of calm and peacefulness that washed over me with this knowledge. Suddenly, I experienced a life review. My life played before my eyes, detailing every supposed insignificant event I had ever had. It played before me like a film on a screen. The experience felt as if it happened in both an instance, and yet in an eternity. This dichotomous experience permeated every aspect of the event. Not only did I experience the life review as it occurred from past to present, but also present to past. I saw every event from a third-person perspective, but also re-experienced the events as they happened in real time. I felt a wave of emotions from every event I had ever experienced, as a never-ending cycle of joyfulness, grief, love, angst, peacefulness, anxiety, etc. The most impactful part of this experience was reliving my most traumatic moments in which I was emotionally hurt by another. During those events, I not only felt every emotion that I had experienced in that moment, but every emotion that the person inflicting pain upon me was experiencing. Not only this, but I also felt every emotion that the other person had ever experienced in their life up until that moment. This was incredibly enlightening for me, and provided me with a grand sense of empathy and forgiveness for the most egregious harm I felt. It wasn't as though I had a sense of the exact circumstances of their past, or an omniscient sense of their specific history, that I could take as impossible knowledge back with me after this experience. But I had a greater sense of knowing and understanding of their emotional state that led them to these awful actions. I also understood how my actions could have unintentional emotional consequences for others. I understood how I could be conceived as an enemy in someone else's story. Everything made sense in those moments. The indescribable lessons I learned from these events gave me an unbounded sense of peace, understanding, and empathy. I knew without a shadow of a doubt that everything happens for a reason, and moreover, that everything had to unfold the way that it did. When I came back from this experience, I never let go of the indescribable feelings of knowledge and lessons I learned. I also finally understood what the figure in my dream intended when he told me I wasn't ready yet. My life behind the veil. I never used to believe. In fact, I was angry at the very idea that a God could exist, especially a God who would allow so much suffering on earth. I was a fierce atheist, convinced that spirituality was nothing more than a crutch for people afraid to face reality. And then, everything changed. On September 14, 2020, I had a heart attack. I wasn't clinically dead, but what I experienced was more real than anything I've ever lived through. It wasn't a dream. It wasn't a hallucination. It was a state of awareness that shattered everything I thought I knew. I found myself in a level of consciousness I couldn't have imagined. It was as if everything, past, present, future, was happening all at once. I could perceive life through countless perspectives, like I was looking through the eyes of every human being, understanding their truth, their story. The world, the universe, all living beings were deeply connected, united by an energy beyond description. At some point, I experienced what's known as a life review. But this wasn't just a mental replay. It was deeper, more vast. I relived every moment of my life, every feeling, every detail, even the ones I had long forgotten. I didn't just see things from my point of view. I felt the emotions of others, the people I had hurt, and the ones who had hurt me. And for the first time, I truly understood. No one causes pain without carrying pain themselves. Every action, every word, even the hurtful ones, are rooted in a deeper wound. That awareness brought me forgiveness, clarity, compassion. I could see how even my own actions had unknowingly impacted others. I saw how, in someone else's story, I might have been the villain. And in those moments, everything just made sense. I passed through a tunnel. It's hard to explain. It wasn't just a passage, it was a journey, a revelation. A golden light enveloped me. Intense yet soft, blinding but not painful. It didn't judge me, it welcomed me. And in that light, truths were revealed that I can't even put into words. I didn't see heaven, nor some fantasy world. But I understood something. What I used to see as coincidences, injustices, or random tragedies were actually part of something larger. Nothing happens by chance. Every moment, no matter how painful, is necessary for our growth. Not as punishment, but as experience. Even in suffering there is meaning. When I came back, I wasn't the same. I didn't convert to a religion, but I became deeply spiritual. I carry within me a peace I never knew before. I'm no longer angry at the idea of God. I see life through a different lens. I no longer fear death. It's not an ending, it's a return. What I experienced gave me a whole new way of seeing others, with empathy, with compassion. My relationship with my family is deeper, more honest. I understand now that behind every wound there's a story. And today, even the ordinary moments feel sacred. If you had told me before that I would one day speak about spirituality, I would have laughed in your face. And yet, here I am. I'm not here to convince you. I'm here to share. So that maybe, just maybe, someone out there, someone who's doubting, struggling, or searching for meaning, might find a spark of hope in my story. Thank you for listening to this near-death experience. If this story moved you, please consider liking, commenting, and sharing it. It's a small action for you, but it means the world to this growing channel. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next journey beyond the veil. Every click helps us give voice to these powerful stories. Take care of yourself and those you love. Until next time, keep sharing the light. Stay curious, stay open. Let's lift the veil together.